Thanks for tuning in to the Medevac podcast, powered by the Robert Irvine Foundation, whose mission is to support and strengthen the physical and mental well-being of our nation's heroes and their families. I'm one of your hosts, David Reid.
And I'm your other host, Christian Meyers. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Medevac podcast. If you're new here, there's a price for the show. You have to share it with a friend or family member if you get something out of today's episode. We've got a pretty good one today. We're talking about some fun stuff. Our guests today are Laura and Wayne Silverman. They are an incredible couple. Laura is a 10-year Navy vet and a licensed psychotherapist, and Wayne is the Chief Mindfullness Officer at their clinic, Sweetgrass Wellness. They also have Sweetgrass Integrated Therapies. Was that correct?
Counseling and therapy,
excuse me, out of Atlanta. We're here to talk about what they offer today and a little bit about their backgrounds and history. So thanks for joining us today, guys.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming in.
a pleasure and an honor.
Yeah.
Really, it is.
And you guys are from
We're from Decatur, Georgia.
Georgia.
Yeah, and
We're off to Georgia next week for Best Ranger competition. Are you familiar?
No.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool competition that they do for Rangers.
And where is that?
That's in Fort Liberty.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fun.
Fort Moore.
Ah.
I'm so
So is
confused
that-
with the new names
They
of
keep
these
changing the
bases.
names.
They changed the names.
Of
right.
all of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Fort Moore,
Right,
which used to be Fort Benning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, welcome.
Thank you.
And let's kind of peel back to how you guys got started, and I'm sure there was quite a bit of a path that brought you to where you're at today.
Yeah.
10 years in the Navy as well. So
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about that? What inspired
Sure.
you to join?
Sure. So I was a kid living in a really small town in Florida with not a whole lot of prospects for school. You know, my family didn't have resources. And so, they came to the high schools and they were selling the GI Bill. And I said, yes. So I thought I would do like probably a lot of folks think they're going to go in and do a few years
Yeah.
and then get their GI Bill. And then 10 years later, I was leaving the service at that time as a mother, and it kind of changed the dynamic for me. But I served mostly abroad. And I got out the same year that women were first allowed on ships on the USS Jason. So
Oh, wow.
it was sort of that time frame when there was a big transition around women in the Navy. So
Yeah.
it was an interesting time. So I am not your typical person, I think, who might be doing this kind of work. I joined the service when I turned 2 weeks after my 18th birthday, spent 10 years, got out, was a mom, became a teacher, taught
What were you
elementary
doing in the
school.
Navy?
So I was at that time, it was called a radio man. So it was a communications job. And so my first job was a Morse code operator, which was
Wow.
interesting. And did, respond to Maydays in the merchants fleet. So
Very
it was
cool.
kind of a real job, but to me, it was like, I didn't realize that was even a thing.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a fun job. And then I ended up transitioning over to other sort of positions within that field. And then also ended up being the person, if you were discharged from any of the schools in San Diego, the communication schools, you came through me to decide what happened to you. It was a very independent position. And it's when I started understanding my affinity for working with people and trying to help people resolve significant issues and those kinds of things. That was sort of my opening. So when I was discharged then, I was by then a single mom, and I was really wanting a schedule that matched my children. So I went to school and became a teacher,
Okay.
which worked really great. And then discovered through that what I really loved was helping kids believe they could learn more than actually whether or not they could learn the multiplication tables. I figured they essentially, eventually would. I just wanted them to feel good about that. And I liked working with the families. And so I just was really evolving towards being a therapist. I always say I was born a social worker. And so I just ended up kind of going and getting the paper for that. And in that work, I always was very interested in something besides talk therapy, because I know from my own experience that one can become exquisitely clear about why you're responding the way you respond,
Sure.
or why you feel the way you feel, and it not change anything, right? So I started on this path of looking for more mind-body modalities, ways that were sort of more rapid, recovery as well, as opposed to spending years talking about something like how can we help people feel better sooner. So I've been doing that for many years, and a few years ago, I decided to spend Thanksgiving in Mexico. And the first day we were there, I had breakfast with a friend, an old ex-college girlfriend of a friend, and we had breakfast with her, and she started telling me about her work. And she'd been doing medicine work for 10 years and had trained with Johns Hopkins and was just very serious about the therapeutic method. She wasn't a therapist, but she had really taken a deep dive. I'm a bit of a science geek, and so is she. And so that resonated very strongly with me. But I didn't buy in right away because I like a healthy dose of skepticism. Anything that sounds like it's really going to be great for everybody, I'm like, maybe, right? Yeah. So I started doing some work around that, started interviewing some of her previous clients to try to understand why they had done it, what their experience was, what the outcome was, whether or not they felt it was valuable, and ended up saying to her, okay, I'm ready. I want to do it with you. And I went into it like a scientist. I thought I'm going to take the medicine and I'm going to evaluate what's happening. Oh, I feel that. Oh, I can tell this is changing.
Yeah.
I was going through that until I wasn't.
Exactly.
What kind of medicine are we talking about?
It was psilocybin. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And what kind of dose was she providing to you?
2.5 grams.
Okay.
So they grow their own spores, and they do some hybrids. And so they knew very specific what the doses were.
Gotcha.
And I've really learned to refine that as well through just the sources that we have for getting them. We're not growing them ourselves at this point, but
Was that your first experience?
it was my first experience. I
At
was
2.5. Wow.
totally really kind of straight edge. I'd never experimented much, because anytime I did, I always felt miserable. I got deathly sick once when somebody gave me like a mushroom tea, and it was like, okay, no thanks. And so just never did it. And then I had kids. So I was like, I just didn't put myself in that position. I like to be the driver. If I'm going to, I was always the driver.
Absolutely.
So that was sort of me. So I'm not sort of the person you would think of, when people say to me, I've never had any experience with this. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I totally understand that. I didn't, I hadn't either. So I went into it, her insistence, and I agree, and this is something that we work a lot with folks on, is having an intention about why are you doing this and what do you hope is the outcome of this. And I didn't really know, and we talked about it for a long time. And I finally said, well, I have trouble really trusting people. Like, people think that I'm close, and there's the thing in the back of my mind that's just waiting for you to show me something,
Interesting.
right? Always.
And as a therapist, I can assume that you've probably peeled back those layers and
for sure,
and identified the childhood trauma associated
exactly. I
to
knew
that.
exactly where it came from. But it was there, and I wasn't able to kind of unload that. And it showed up in my personal relationships, and it showed up everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, that's what I want to work on.
Okay.
And so that seems like a really good intention. Of course, the medicine did help me with that, but not in the way that I thought it would. And we can certainly talk more about sort of specific kinds of experiences people have. But it set me on this path. When I left Mexico, I had a list of people in my mind that I wanted to start to present this. And it's risky because it's outside scope because it's illegal.
Sure.
So it's risky to talk about it even with folks. But my own experience was so powerful that I felt somewhat of a moral imperative to start to discuss this more openly about the potential for this work. Always understanding that, they're going to have to do it outside the States. Yeah. They're going to have to go somewhere, but where can you do it? Do I send them to Mexico to my teacher? She became the person I trained with. And some people I did refer to her. But then it became clear that this was something that was so important to us to kind of deepen it a little bit, to add to it, going beyond just the experience of having the medicine, to try to build on what I have come to understand is sort of a soul healing. I think particularly with veterans, I've always wanted to work with veterans. Moving into the VA, when I got out of school, they weren't really hiring social workers at that time. And it's just sort of a hard system to break into. And so I ended up not being able to really do that. But one of the things I was always interested in is sort of the kind of soul wounding that happens, that can occur to veterans when they're asked under very real circumstances and for very good reasons, but still having to violate sort of this human set of values that can just harm your heart and your soul.
Sure.
And so we're finding that work, that piece of it was so important that we wanted to kind of manage that ourselves. We didn't want to hand that off to somebody. We wanted to build it out, to bring in some other things that we understand about human need, things like the need for ritual, the need for, kind of having sort of this a more earthy kind of thing where we take away the technology and take away stuff and just sort of make it more pure to just human to human.
Sure.
And so that's when we stepped into kind of really doing this ourselves. And the response has been amazing because there's a great need for it. More importantly, the results people have had has been so remarkable. Just as remarkable as my experience was for most people. Some people, people had varying, degrees of success, particularly on one journey. And, there's protocols for moving beyond one journey. But for many people, that's sufficient. We're not, I read some of the sites that people can go to abroad and they talk about giving them 15 grams. And I'm like, my God, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why.
The point?
Yeah.
Right. My question is why. Right. And so we really are driven by the research and I trust it. We've had enough experience. We've been doing this for a couple of years now in a very formal, structured way. And I have great confidence in the medicine as long as the screening is done properly.
Sure.
Right? And as long as the preparation is done and as long as there's real integration.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're very clear also that anybody could get some psilocybin mushrooms and do it. They can have a friend who's done it before and do it with them.
Sure.
We're very clear that following therapeutic guidelines, and we follow strict Johns Hopkins protocols in a therapeutic setting with eye mask, with headphones, isolated. We don't do groups. It's all individual. That's the way that people can get something out of this.
Sure.
We advise people against doing it on their own.
Yes.
And certainly there's people out there who can do it with you that are well-trained. We feel that the therapeutic value of this is so high that having clear professionals working with you in a certain way is the way that you can maximize the value and minimize harm.
Absolutely.
You can harm yourself. And, in our screening process, we're very clear about what other medications you're on, what other diagnoses might be present. So all of that goes into our equation.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I'd like to peel that back a little bit too, but I want to hear about your journey and how you both got connected.
Sure. So I was a teacher as well. That was my initial career. I was a high school teacher in earth science.
Okay.
And then a college teacher, and then began to run nonprofit organizations, mainly human service organizations. So I was CEO of a number of organizations that really help people, human family service organizations, educational, and then I got into academic work. My last position like that was at the Center for Ethics at Emory University.
Okay.
Laura and I, we've been together for about over 20 years. And one of the things that I really gained a great respect for her was the integrity with which she approached this work. And, she really wants to help people, especially people who have histories of trauma. And she showed me that there are other methods other than sitting and talking, weekly for years with a therapist, that people can gain a hold of their trauma.
Yes.
And so she, in her conventional practice in Atlanta, uses a number of modalities, including brain spotting, to help the brain stores trauma in a place that isn't verbal. And so that's why she uses brain spotting for that. And she realized through the years that this was very effective. But it wasn't until we went to Mexico and that she had that unlocking of her own trauma and her own experience that she realized that she can't withhold that from people. That this is something that that is so effective that we have to do this. And I got on the train with her. I was, I went to college in the early 70s, and I experimented.
And all that implies.
And all that implies.
I'm sure no intention was set with those experiences.
None
as well.
whatsoever.
Fun intentions. Yeah.
And, grew up in Chicago and, Grateful Dead and all of the above.
Yeah.
And I'm actually getting chills right now because I realized through my life that wasn't where I needed to be going at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do it again for years and years.
Okay.
And then Laura said, I really would like to do this with Leslie.
Yeah.
And I got a little bit nervous about it because I did have some trouble with some of the psychedelics that I did in my youth. I ended up doing it and had a transformative experience related to my mother's death. And didn't realize what I had been holding, and I actually was with her during that journey.
Wow.
And it turned me around. And having a safe setting, being with people who really understand what this is about and allowing you to have your journey just totally changed my view of this. And so as soon as we finished there, Laura said, we need to do this.
Yeah.
And so we then got on that path a couple of years ago, and we've been doing it since.
Okay.
It's beautiful. So I'm very curious, you growing up in the 70s, obviously that was free love, right?
Everything was free.
Right.
I grew up in the 60s and 70s. Yeah,
Right.
Born in the 50s. So I was born
you
in
got
52.
You got to experience it kind of like the whole transition
Yes.
of that. I want to talk about Reagan and the war on drugs and how it was such a detriment to, the ripple effect it had over decades of just misinformation, propaganda, and how has that really meshed into re-educating people over the years as well?
Go ahead.
Oh, it's definitely an issue.
You have that loaded.
It's definitely an issue for sure. Yeah. So, people, whether we realize it or not, we internalize all that whole, this is your brain on drugs, the frying egg and the just say no.
I remember hearing that, if you're getting the waves, as you get the waves with psilocybin, that is your brain bleeding.
Right. It's dying. Right. Yeah. And all the, just say no. And all of that, the news of, all the raids on drugs. I grew up in Florida at a time when everybody was getting busted for bringing in something. Even my doctor friend of our family had an airstrip on his property. Everybody seemed to be doing it, right?
Airstrip on his property.
Yeah, right. It was like bringing it, So, that kind
Florida.
of seems like a weird, it's like, oh, that's kind of other
I think
world.
they call it the keys.
Indeed, exactly. Exactly.
Many kilos.
Many keys, yes. And so, I think that people have internalized all of that. And I've always say with people when they talk about, well, it's illegal. Say, well, not everywhere.
Yes.
Which tells us that it's not the medicine, right? If it's legal in one state, that means it's legal for a reason because it works and it's helpful.
Yeah.
The fact that, the rest of the country is very slow. And I think I live in a state that's probably going to be very, very slow. They just, like a year ago, just had their first pot store, medical marijuana store open. It's just very slow. So the fact that it's illegal doesn't really say anything about the efficacy of the medication.
It just figures.
It's just part of this political.
It's got to be taxed properly. It's got to be regulated properly.
Right.
And I think Big Pharma had a huge hit on that.
Oh,
in the
no
70s.
doubt. Because I think it's a really hard thing to figure out. I think politically, though, I think that in Michael Pollan's book, he does a good job of sort of explaining how, peace and love was very inconvenient if you're trying to get people to go fight a war in Vietnam.
Absolutely.
And so that became a very dangerous drug because it was preventing people from being, forced into these situations.
Are we seeing that now, though? We're kind of seeing the same thing.
It's a little weird. Yeah,
It's
there's kind of this change of we're sort of now there is sort of like the us and them. Those are the people who do that stuff. We're the people who are patriotic and it's unclear. It's gotten really kind of it's gotten very distorted.
Yes.
Right. I think that's probably a national pastime right now. It's distortion.
Post-war syndrome.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of
Right.
leads to that divide.
It does.
Obviously, we saw that, post-World War II led into the free love movement,
Right.
Vietnam.
Right. We have these swings.
Yep,
right.
exactly.
Why don't you
And
mention that Michael Pollan's book as well, just to
Right. Well, for those people who aren't aware of that, he wrote a great book that they made a Netflix documentary out of. And as always, the book is better than the movie.
Yeah. How to Change Your Mind.
How to Change Your Mind.
Yeah.
Right. And it's very useful in helping people understand. It's one of the first resources I suggest to people who are curious but scared, uncertain, don't really know. They heard about it, but they don't have much information. I think it's a really good resource for helping people understand both the science, the legalities, the politics, but then also to get more information about real stories of people who have tried it. And Michael Pollan doing his own experience of this and writing about that was really helpful too, I think, because he's such a respected science writer. It's gotten very complicated. What fascinates me, and I say this sometimes to people, is how they will take a medication prescribed to them by a physician without batting an eye, without looking to see all of the things that are potential side effects.
Yeah.
And for most of these medications, there are pretty significant side effects. And if you want to stop taking them, they can be even greater,
Yes.
side effects and negative
That's
experience.
have you seen the Dosed
Yes.
documentary as well? That's a great example of
on Xanax.
Xanax.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
SSRIs.
Well, I had someone come to me and say that she was worried about doing any psilocybin. She wanted to, but she was afraid because she was afraid of psychosis. And I asked her what medication was she taking, and she's taking Pristiq. And one of the side effects of Pristiq is potential psychosis.
Yeah, absolutely.
So your doctor had no problem giving you this, but your doctor's saying to you, "Oh, scary psilocybin."
Yeah, careful.
Careful. Yeah, I'd rather not. Right. And so it's trying to help people educate themselves and to be looking at sources that are real sources that don't have an agenda. They're just giving you the data, and there's lots of studies out there available too that you can pull up. There's lots of them. I'm sending them to people all the time that are just specific to their issue. If you have TBI, there's some work around that, right? If you have anxiety, if you have grief, if you have trauma, if you have sexual violence in your history, all these things, there are absolutely, there's something out there that can speak to it. So that's part of trying to overcome that misinformation that has really gotten interwoven and internalized by so many folks.
And even in the area of addiction, these medications can be used to help addiction. It's almost like the opposite was true. They felt like,
Ibogaine.
Yeah.
Ibogaine,
Great
absolutely.
example. 60% chance within the first use to negate
Right.
heroin addiction.
Heroin addiction, absolutely.
Some people don't know that Bill Wilson, the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, he really wanted Alcoholics Anonymous to embrace psychedelics as a way to heal people and to end addiction. It didn't really happen that way for him.
Well, during the time as well, I think that you're
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the point being that there's so many legitimate and documented uses for these medicines that it's almost like if you turn a blind eye, you're really doing a disservice to humanity, and that's what really motivates Laura and me.
Yeah,
right.
And she has kind of changed many people's view about the role of your soul and spirit in this whole process and in our lives, really. People who don't even, have that sense, when they go through our retreats with us, they really come away understanding what spirit is for them and how their soul may have been so wounded, and they regain that. It's such a wonderful thing for us to experience when we experience it with these people.
It sounds like you guys have an approach that's like half scientific and half spiritual or ritualistic.
It is.
It's kind of a mesh of the two, right?
And we don't we don't talk a lot overtly with people initially around sort of the spiritual piece of this.
Okay.
Because for so many people that gets bound up in religion, and that is not an area that we're interested in kind of we don't have a position on folks' religion.
Sure.
But we know from the work what's actually appears to be happening. And so the structure of our retreats is built with that in mind. And we just say to people, we're going to ask you to step out of your life.
Suspend your.
Suspend what you think you know about medicine and mental health care, and allow us to take you on a journey that just one little small part of it is imbibing the psilocybin, right? The rest of this is all part of this to help you to connect. And in my mind, it is a kind of remembering, right? It's like reconnecting with who you were when you came out of the womb, right?
Yeah.
Before the stuff happened to you, right? And whatever it was, whenever it was, the things that obscured you or disconnected you from your essence, from who you truly are and your potential and all of that. So our hope is that the medicine, we've seen it again and again, help people sort of reconnect with that aspect of themselves, where they have a new perspective. I just talking with somebody recently who's interested in coming in. Our next one is in July, we think, into July, and was talking about wanting to do it. And she's, my friend did it, and she keeps telling me how she has a new perspective on everything.
Yep.
I said, yeah, that is a great way of describing it. It's a new perspective because something has shifted internally. You've reconnected with what I think is already your wisdom, right? The stuff that you already knew, but you got separated from it by virtue of life circumstances and experiences and sort of the mold that you might, the family we're born into is a crapshoot, right? Sure. And so you have to adapt to the environment that you're born into, and that requires change of the little psyche, the little baby that comes into the world. And so that's that separation from that pure self. And I think psilocybin, of all the medications, psilocybin is one that really seems to really help people get a better connection with that, a really solid connection with that.
I think there's a lot of salient characteristics with that spiritual element to it. And I'm wondering if in your kind of experiences over the years, you've kind of bridged that gap to understand what that is from. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So that's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
Right? Because I was recently asked to be a reader on someone's book who was talking about how to be a soul therapist, like how to connect with soul. And nowhere in the book could she define it. I kept saying, where's the definition? What are you saying? Right. And it's the problem, right? Like, what is that? So in our thinking, the way that we think about this is to think about it more as sort of what people often think of as their intuition. Right. So intuition is that pure positive thing that comes, not the fear-based clenching of the gut that says, oh God, I shouldn't do that. Right.
Sure.
Intuition has a different flavor to it. It's a very different sort of, and it's almost like just a knowing. You don't even, it's like knowing without knowing how you know. Right. But you know, it's not like you have to debate it with yourself. You just know. You may ignore it, which many of us do. But that seems to be kind of more of what it is. And so it's sort of a sense that we already possess. And some of us are more highly attuned to it than others. And I do think that directly is the block is having to be self-protective from the external world.
So you shut off that internal wisdom almost. Like
it's already there. Yeah.
That intuition is kind of shut off. So that's a great kind of rewriting of that, to be honest. It's a great perspective. And I think it's beautiful too. There's so many elements to that across everything that we've seen is, not necessarily like, religion, specific religion, but it's like, I believe in something bigger than myself.
Yes.
So I think that, we innately have this ability to have that intuition. And we do it every day in ourselves. I have a tendency to think that we have trained ourselves already, but the thoughts that are in our minds prevent us from engaging in that.
For sure. And I think those thoughts are often fear-based. I spend a lot of time talking with people. There's research that suggests that an adult has something like 60,000 thoughts a day. and that 80% of those thoughts are negative by nature, like evolutionarily, like it's doing a risk assessment all the time.
Sure.
So if you're doing a risk assessment, you're not looking for rainbows and butterflies, right? You're looking for what could go wrong, what's familiar, what's going to, all that. That's what we're doing.
All the other external factors, they say you check your phone around 500 times a day, just glancing at it,
Yes.
whatever it is.
Right.
60,000 thoughts, 500 times a day.
Yeah.
So
Right.
all your thoughts are cut off immediately,
Yes.
right? And I think that's another great aspect of the plant-based medicines is because you have a time to be in your head for once.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, when are you alone? When's the music not playing? When are you in silence?
Yes.
And most of the answers are always going to be in the shower, right?
Yes.
And that's when you have the best arguments and all the best thoughts in the world.
Right.
It's because you're alone with your thoughts for once, and
Right.
you're going through that.
Yes, exactly. And you're allowing yourself to just sort of be physically present. For most people, they're feeling the experience of, water is one of those
Yeah.
elements, because we work a lot with elements when we're describing our experience with people. We use the elements. Water is the one that is just so common and familiar and is comforting and soothing. And, if you've had a bad day, you're tired, you could take a shower. If you're upset, you go take a shower. It's just like that use of water. And so I think that's one of the ways in which people can connect with that self,
Yes.
right? By being really present with the sensations as opposed to all the evaluation
And avoidance.
and avoidance.
right.
Oh, my national pastime.
Yeah.
The other national
The
pastime.
other national pastime.
Yeah, as avoidance. Right.
And
Exactly.
in our we do have a 5-day curriculum that we designed.
Okay.
So our retreats in Mexico, which anybody can come, but we seem to focus on a lot of people who want to unlock some of that trauma that's in their lives.
Okay.
And just recently now we have added a program for veterans,
Okay.
which we could certainly talk about more.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that 5-day curriculum is very critical to us. Laura said that the medicine is only a part of what we offer in this experience.
Yeah.
This journey that they go on, in fact, the water element, as an example, we take people to an ancient hot springs. I mean, it's been used for millennia. And they get an experience there that is very much a part of connecting them to that part of the universe.
Sure.
And we do fire. We take them to an indigenous wilderness garden area. It's just all part of kind of building this whole structure that they yield to. Remember, Laura said about suspending their disbelief or their previous thoughts about what this is about. People that let go of all of that and go with the program, they get full benefit out of this thing.
Absolutely. So what does that 5-day program look like? So I imagine Monday through Friday.
Yeah, something like that.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first night when they usually arrive around 2:00 and we, settle them in to get their room.
And this is in San Miguel de Allende,
yes,
Mexico.
which is a beautiful World UNESCO site.
And we selected it specifically because of what it is.
Yes, right. It just has a very beautiful vibe. It's a very tranquil city. It's a lovely place. People are lovely there. But the first night, there's a welcome dinner, but then we do a fire ceremony right away. And we make it really clear that we're not pretending like we're shamans and we're not pretending like we're doing an indigenous thing. We are doing something that Westerners will understand,
Sure.
right? And we are going to use what we understand about ritual. There's evidence of ritual before we have evidence of language in human species, and so it seems to be a human need. And ritual serves a couple purposes. One is it really helps you to focus your attention and intention, but it also takes you out of your everyday life.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the important
That's
part.
that's a big piece of it, right? Just carving out this little bookend of this trip. We're going to start with the fire ceremony, in which they just throw in the things that they no longer need, right? Then we move into meditation and breath work, and then we'll do the journey and move into massage, so grounding back into their body, because it's such a physical experience. People are usually exhausted the second day or the day following the journey, and then move into sort of being the earthbound, it's like groundedness in the earth. So we do the hike in the botanical garden area, and we do the
We've incorporated cacao.
We usually do the water, right?
Oh,
and now
cacao,
we're doing also a cacao ceremony. And the cacao is very important because it is also a plant medicine.
Yes.
And
And
it
it-
provides a really significant dopamine
Very
bump.
married, the two.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They are very synergistic. They come from the same part of the world. That's just like a lovely synergy there. And that is also a place to do a little bit of visualization. So this is done post-journey. So the stuff that if we had said to them early on, we're going to do a visualization of you meeting your guardian angel or your guide or your whatever, the people would look at us like we have two heads. And that's okay. So we don't talk about it beforehand. We just say we're going to do a cacao ceremony. And post-medicine, all of that makes sense,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
They've had some experience that now this makes sense. And they can go very deeply into that. And so, and then we end and we do the water, and we end with a fire ceremony in which they throw away any Kleenex, their tears that we've collected, that they have collected during their journey, that they can let go. And it's sort of like bookending
Yes.
the experience. And then we do encourage people that even if they're going home, to try to have a few days where they're not jumping right back in,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah,
Very important.
right, absolutely. And we talk about that before they even come. When we first start doing the screening, we have a series of questions we ask them to really contemplate and spend some time with over a month or two. And one of them is, what is the work you envision that you may need to do? And often people don't have any idea. They'll say, I just need to go to the gym more. I need to do whatever more. It's like, okay, so we start to plant the seeds like, well, I'd like for you to start to see if you can't do a little meditation every day. And I know it may feel difficult right now, but I want you to try to make space for it because you're going to need it later. Because one of the things about medicine work is in the integration phase, you have to make psychological and physical space to hear the wisdom that's coming, the insights, all that information that your brain opened up for. And when you come out of the medicine, that default mode network, it's trying to go back online and sort of shut everything down. It can't really unknow it, but you can't handle all of it all at the same time. So it happens for days and weeks and even months where people will continue to get insights. And my teacher always said, you could be walking down the street and it's like you hear a little puzzle piece snap into place. And I've had that experience of going, suddenly I know something, I understand something in my life or something from my history.
And just to clarify, the 5 days on site is just a small part. We meet with them in advance in therapy sessions. We go through the 5-day period, and then there's a couple of months of integration.
Okay.
And that's part of the program.
Yes.
And we meet with them again by Zoom, or if they're local, we meet with them in person.
Right.
And they go through a very clear couple of month-long period where we give them assignments. They are part of the program. So it's this is the program. Here's the 5-day curriculum on site.
Yes.
So just to clarify that.
That's beautiful, and I think that's how it should be done. Can you talk about? We talked about the kind of ceremony setting. Let's talk about the science setting as well, because I think that's really important to educate the audience on. Hey, I'm not just going down to Mexico and just doing a bunch of, psilocybin here. I'm sure that you have medical professionals on standby and stuff. So walk me through some of that as well.
Sure. So we don't own a brick and mortar there. What we do is when we have a couple specific locations that we do, and they're big, large homes, Mexican homes. And so there's one in particular that we really love to use because it has a beautiful, massive courtyard that is all enclosed, and it's such a lovely place for people to process on their own, and they can have the massage outside and nobody can see them, and it's like just this great opportunity for people to be really close to nature and the sounds and the rhythms of that place. We have a nurse practitioner who works specifically with psilocybin, and she's a sitter herself who is part of that screening. We work with Dr. Anil Paulus here in the States, who does a medical screening in advance. And then at the end, we provide him with all of the sort of we do some, biopsychosocial assessments. So we have that data. He has that. And then a month after someone's journey, we reassess them, do those reassessments. And so we can see the shift in the data, because data don't lie, right? And so it helps us to be able to see, are we on the right track with these folks? And if there's some areas where there doesn't seem to be much movement, then we know where we need to focus on our integration or other therapy, or make suggestions to them for working with their therapist. So we have that in place so that we can take seriously the fact that this is healthcare. And we want, while we don't have that available to us here, we can replicate that somewhere else. And so we want to make sure that people understand that they're not just talking to Wayne and I, they're going to be talking to other folks who are going to be looking at them to make sure that it's a good fit for them. Because the most important thing is for someone to come and feel safe in the medicine. And that safety comes in the form of information, like just having enough information. People ask us every kind of question you can think of, and we answer them all with great, happiness and openness, because it's so important. And I always say to them, even if you think I already answered it, if you think you already ask again, because it's so important to feel safe, psychologically safe. And when they come to Mexico, we have to reassure people there's a lot of information about Mexico, so dangerous and all those things. And it's like, here's how you travel, and this is how
that's another
layer
of misinformation.
Exactly.
And just not
just
understanding.
unnecessary. It's just unnecessary.
Where we go, we specifically are dedicated to San Miguel. In fact, we are thinking of buying a place there.
Yes.
Because of the fact that for over almost 100 years, there've been this relationship between expats and the local community, so that the local community has been built. It's been cared for. You don't see people hungry. Every doorstep is swept every morning. Everyone's friendly. There's no horn honking. There's like no stoplights or stop signs there. Everybody waits their turn.
Yeah.
And so this whole spirit, and the reason, there is a reason that it's a World UNESCO site. It's not only feels like you're in the 1500s in Spain or Italy there.
Right.
The people are friendly with each other. It's such a wonderful place to do this, and people feel safe. Nighttime, you walk, into the old part of the city. You walk home. It's just really a location, and place is a very important part for the success of this program.
Setting. Right.
Exactly. Absolutely. And so part of our work is that prep is also for them to really have time to talk to us and to ask us questions, and to try to feel like they know us a little bit, so they can feel safe when they arrive. And we hire our own drivers. All of the staff we've handpicked. They're all people that we know and we really love as people, and they are completely on board with supporting the folks who come. And so we are able to tell them, like, step by step what to expect. It's going to be fine. And when you get to see us, you're going to feel like you're walking into a home, and feeling that safety.
And a family.
Right.
We have a network of people now. In fact, the night before we left this last time, about 2 weeks ago, we had a party for all of the people who help us in this program.
Yes.
Came together, and
it's like 14 people.
Yeah.
And it was
fantastic.
just lovely. Yeah. And, varying degrees of English spoken, but it's all works. It all works. You've been abroad. You just have to have a sense of humor, and you'll be able to make yourself understood. So it's that coming in, and then we do talk about, if you're coming to this place, it's not your place. You don't know this place. Is there something that you need that will help you to feel like it's your place? It's kind of like when you're in the military, they tell families, I remember counseling folks, if you're moving, you have kids, bring something, pack something in a suitcase that you can put up in the bedroom that says, this is their bedroom. This is their space, right? It's my space. And so we say the same thing to these people, is bring something, your pillow, a blanket, a childhood toy. I've had ratty blankets come from childhood, little binkies and blankets and stuff, toys, photographs of people, stones. People bring all kinds of objects that help them to make the space their own. And then we journey in that space. And so they get to make it their own, and then we work in that space. Okay. And so it's that way they can stay in the space. There's no transitioning to another room and going somewhere else to rest or to journal or to reflect. They can stay there And
it's individual journeys.
Right.
We don't do any groups. Total attention the entire time. Somebody's with you the entire time.
Yeah.
And it's really it's an enclosed, safe, back to the, talking about the womb. I mean, it's almost like you're being born again.
Yeah.
In fact, we and I don't know if your audience will be aware through this, that we've started a pilot program for veterans. Being a 10-year Navy vet, Laura has a great affinity for that population. And we're working with Dr. Anil Paulus to find funding for people who can't afford it. And the other thing is, we want to make this available to people regardless of their financial situations.
Right.
Excellent.
Yes.
And so we are trying to partner with organizations who can help us secure the funding. That's what we did this last time.
Okay.
We brought a veteran spouse who was greatly in need of this work, and she was fully funded through contributions.
Yeah.
And so we're wanting to continue this program and always have at least one, maybe more veterans, or have a full veteran program over time.
And I think the reason you're thinking of that is because you're saying that Reborn is one of the things in her journey. She absolutely had the experience of seeing her body on the desert floor and her soul coming into her body. And she says, that's when I was born.
Wow.
And so she had a very powerful experience of that. And I think that that's part of, our hope is not everybody has a mystical experience. Not everybody sees things. I don't.
I always think it's either very spiritual or very ego driven, right?
Yes.
It's kind of
Right.
like you're
like-
battling yourself.
Exactly.
And so sometimes, in my opinion, like when you go on multiple journeys, like that starts to go away, that
Yes,
ego a little
right.
bit, and then you get that mystic
kind of those
experience.
layering, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. The one thing that we do that's a little different than, that's a little bit outside of the research model, because, with research, it has to be done a very rigid, specific thing. And they have a pretty homogenous group of people to do a study, or else it just throws your data off,
Sure.
right? Is that if we are working with someone and after an hour and a half, 2 hours, it looks to us like they are very much in their ego, we will give them a very small boost. And it's a small boost. It's less than, it's like 500 milligrams. It usually doesn't take very much.
Okay.
And I do wonder, there's a part of me that wonder if there isn't a little bit of placebo effect, because people do go very deep after that. So it's almost as if they can let go.
They
then,
let go after.
Right.
I think there certainly is an ego, or I'm sorry, what did
Placebo.
I just get confused
Yes.
with that placebo effect, because you mentioned before, when you don't have an intention and you just do it recreationally,
Yeah.
there's a huge difference in those two journeys.
Yes,
Absolutely.
right. There is.
Huge.
But there's something else about it too, is that they now can see that in a functional MRI, the brain opens up in areas that when you have an eye mask on, that it doesn't if you don't have an eye mask on.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think that probably what that's a function of is, even if I have my eyes closed, there's still light coming in. So my brain is processing that, right?
Yes.
It's having to process. If I take that away and there's none of that, then there's no need for it to process.
Even just like being actively closing your eyes is
Right.
taking brain
It's
bites.
Exactly right. And so the eye masks that we use, and most people do, is the ones that you can open your eyes, but it's still pitched.
Still, yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another layer of this, because I have people tell me all the time, well, I did it and I was in nature. Or they'll say, can I just be in nature? Yes, but not with us.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
We're doing something different. And I don't want to suggest that people doing it other ways, that they don't get any benefit. I think you certainly can. And I think that people who do it in groups get benefits from it. I know that that's absolutely possible. The difference for us is we're working with people, most of whom have significant traumas, significantly overactivated amygdalas. Their fight and flight response is so high all the time. They are not able to let themselves become vulnerable in a group of people, especially when they're a group of people they don't know.
Absolutely.
Right? Or if there's sounds going on around them or people reacting around them.
Yeah.
That's so triggering for so many people. So
especially on psilocybin.
absolutely.
If
Absolutely.
a door closes on that stuff, you're sucked right out of it.
Exactly. So it's like, we don't even want it. We have nothing to prove. Nobody that comes to work with us has anything to prove. You just put your eye mask on, put your headphones on, sink in, we're going to be right here with you. We're going to stay right here. And if you need us, you're going to let us know. We develop signals, things people can do, but we also have become, the longer you do this, you get very intuitive about what a person needs, right? And sometimes we know there's a time to ask, are you okay? There's times when now I can recognize they're restless because they're probably cold. Their body temperature is dropping. They don't know they're cold, but their body is moving around a lot. So put a blanket over them. Now they're settled down. Sitting closer just where your hip is touching their leg, just so they feel grounded. And just allowing people there every now and again, if somebody's looks like their tendency is to hold their tears because it's habituated body memory. They're trying to hold, to kind of just put your hand on their shoulder and squeeze a little bit is often enough to allow them to release, to let that go. And so, so I know there are lots of folks who do this in a number of different ways, and I do not in any way dispute that they may be getting benefit from this. I just think it's a missed opportunity.
Sure.
Just to get the most out of it.
Just to get the most out of it. I mean, how many times are you really going to be able to do this, right? And can you do it in a way that we can't make promises and guarantees. What I always say to people is I don't know what's going to happen for you, but I know something important is going to happen.
Yes.
So whatever that is for you. And so why wouldn't you want to do it in a way where you could get as much from the experience as possible so that even if you want to do it again, people who come to us and want to do it a second time, it's usually months out when they feel ready. It's like, okay, I feel like I've gotten a lot. Now I'm curious, like what else might be available to me? Or this has gone away, but now because I peeled that back, now this has risen to the surface and I realize this is the next piece that I need to process and need to work on and to be intentional about that. And so, I mean, could talk about this all day.
And when Laura talks about, keeping your eye mask on, and she also talks about keeping the headphones on, just to clarify for the audience, we use the Johns Hopkins soundtrack. It's
curated.
It's a 7-hour soundtrack that is specifically designed to go through a whole process with the clients.
Okay.
And so it really is clear, and people say when they finish the journey, they could tell that this was designed to go somewhere and then go somewhere else and then ease you out, and then there's a quiet period. It's really remarkable how they've designed this soundtrack.
Right.
That's beautiful. And I think a piece that we didn't hit as well, a really important note, is food. Is the food. So what do you guys do in your program for food?
So we have somebody who comes in and cooks for us. And this last trip, we had 4 individuals over 3 weeks with all different dietary things. And so we just modified that, but it's all, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And people are free on the days when they're not, much of the activities are done in the early part of the day because we want people to have downtime.
Yes.
We want them to have time to either just hang out or go downtown in the evening. Sometimes we'll go to dinner downtown just so people can go down and be in the community and shop or whatever they want to do.
Yeah, socialize and reflect.
Yeah, absolutely. And be in sort of their body in this sort of new feeling. I know the first day following mine, I was so blissed out. I mean, I was just walking around like, I'm just so happy.
Just glowing.
Yes, I was just very happy. So it's allowing that. And so we're really, that's an important piece of this because the neuroplasticity that occurs when you do mushrooms too allows for really changes in palate for some people. And so they may want less sugar. They may want less fat. They may want, so we offer
less alcohol,
less alcohol for sure.
That's a big one.
That's a big one, right? Because it's the sugar thing too, right? And so we do try to make sure that the meals are clean and healthy and delicious and beautiful so that they can really be, enticed, and the brain can start to like it over that 4 days following their journey, that 3 or 4 days that they're there, so that they'll maybe carry that home with them and change their, I know for myself, what changed for me is like, I have to have fruit like every day now. Yeah. Like fruit is a thing for me.
We do offer a tropical fruit plate as their very first meal.
Yes.
And it's
perfect.
It's amazing how people deal with that.
It's the best
it's the best thing in the world. I know. There's just
What's your
like
fruit of
nothing.
choice?
And I'm
What's your fruit of choice?
Watermelon.
Watermelon.
Yeah.
The watermelon's always good.
And orange slices. Those
Mango.
two. Oh,
Yeah,
mango's
mango.
good.
One of my favorite
Mango is really
after,
good. Strawberries.
I like papaya.
Yeah,
Yes.
papaya, any sort of melon.
Yes, strawberries are good.
Yeah.
Except
Yeah.
honeydew. No one likes honeydew.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you
Juicy melon.
You're supposed to put salad dressing and salt and pepper on that. It'll be okay. Yeah, that's not good for post.
But I am
post journey.
I am a food guy from way back, and so I really am. In the past, I have been in charge of the meals, and this time I coordinated our. We did get a cook to come and under my direction, and I get local culinary mushrooms from guys that grow those, and all kinds of unusual local cuisine and dishes that I'm proficient in. And
I'm curious, have you done any experimentation with mixing different elements of mushrooms, like lion's mane with, that kind of stuff as well?
We haven't done that in this work.
I'm growing mushrooms myself.
We're growing those ourselves.
I have lion's mane growing at home and oyster and maitake.
Right. But we have been using those products for a long time as part of our own supplemental,
Same.
protocol.
I do the mushroom coffee every morning. So one of the weird things about my Ibogaine experience is I lost all affinity for coffee after that. So I stopped drinking coffee, except the occasional mocha cappuccino from Starbucks. If I'm really going to treat myself cacao.
That's right. It's chocolate.
Ceremonial grade.
And mesquite. We also got in touch with mesquite while we were there. The local people are roasting mesquite beans and brewing it into coffee. I'm sorry to interrupt. But
No, that's. So what's your thoughts on coffee? Just I know kind of off the beaten path here, but-
I mean, I think it's great when people can step away from stimulants of all kinds and just sort of be present.
Yeah.
It just becomes that addiction.
Yeah, right. It's and I don't know. I mean, I guess people are going to do what they do, and I enjoy the taste of coffee, but I drink decaf because I enjoy the taste of coffee. Right. I mean, I'll have caffeinated coffee from time to time, but it's not my preference.
Yeah.
And now we mix it with chicory and mesquite, and it becomes like a nutritional thing. So
we do a coffee, mesquite, and chicory mixture.
Yeah.
When we brew coffee.
Yeah, and that's what we serve in Mexico to folks. It's the decaf, and it's a mixture. So they're drinking coffee, they're enjoying it. They're just getting something other than what they're normally getting.
Yes.
Yeah. So we don't want to be saying people have to be pure. You know what I mean? Like, go live your life, enjoy food, enjoy life, right?
I think that's a big detriment as well. Is what everybody's trying to do is I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Self-judgment.
Yeah. No.
Implicit thoughts.
I think you've got for many people what their diet is the least of their problems, right? The people that we're working, that's the least of their problems, and so. They're already thinking about how they can change things for themselves. That's why they're coming to us, right? They're thinking outside the box. They're trying to find other ways. And so we don't harp a lot on that, but we do encourage it. We think that's part of the things we talk about for integrations, like start to think about this though, because so much of the integration work is in catching your habituations because your habits are all still there.
Yes.
Right? The difference is that you might be able to catch yourself in the process of implementing a habit and then maybe noticing, wait, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore, or I don't really want to do this, or I don't like that anymore, right?
And I also think that a lot of people look at their entire life and they look at their entire habits, like across the board.
Yes.
And it's overwhelming. Yeah. I'll work on that Monday, right?
Yes.
So I always tell people, focus on one specific thing at a time, right? If you have an addiction to coffee, it's not cut out all coffee completely. Exactly. If you're having 3 cups a day, maybe do 2 cups a day for a couple of weeks.
Do half and half. Do half decaf.
It's the slow burn, and same thing with exercise.
Yes.
Like just engage for 2 minutes.
That's right. Yeah. Just a little
just 2
baby
minutes,
steps.
and you'll find a half
baby
hour's
steps
passed.
move you forward too.
That's
right.
It's initiating. I think is the big thing.
Right.
And initiating with small to large goals.
Yes.
Almost everyone that we've worked with have made changes in their lives subsequent to the journey, whether it's diet, whether it's meditating for 5 minutes a day. And some people, especially the veteran spouse who came with us this recently, she made some changes. We met with her in advance. She decided that she wanted to make some changes in advance before she got there. And then since then, it's been dramatic.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
And
right.
I just have such honor and respect for what she has gone through now and where she's going. She's a flag waver now for the program.
Right, because of her experience.
Yeah.
But getting back to sort of this catching ourselves, right? Those habits of being able to decide. It doesn't mean you have to get rid of the habit. You may actually enjoy the habit. You may want to do it anyway, right? And that's fine. It's the whole power of choice. But that's the difference. Before a journey, most of the things we're doing are extremely unconscious. We're in a trance state. It's like driving home and not recognizing that you just passed your exit because you were somewhere else, or you don't remember how you got home, kind of thing. So that sort of trance, we're just sort of unconsciously on rote, and so the medicine allows you to get a little bit of a window into that, to be able to say, well, do I want to do that? Does that still fit me?
Yes.
And some things do, and some things don't, and even the things, so I'll speak about my own experience. When I first went to Mexico, this was my vacation agenda. I was going to complete an online course creation course. I was going to outline a book I'm working on, and I was going to work with clients 2 days a week.
Sounds
that was
like
my
work.
vacation schedule. Yeah. So that didn't happen. Most of that didn't happen. I think I worked 1 day a week for 2 weeks, and we were there for 4 weeks, and didn't happen. After I did the mushrooms, though, after I had my experience, I reflected back on that. And I realized that after about 3 months of the integration work, I started to realize that all of that stuff was something that a part of me thought was necessary for a successful person. If you were successful, you had to have these outward expressions of that people could point to and see.
Sure.
Well, I realized I'm already successful. I'm doing what I love. I'm doing it well. I have, a great client base. I don't have to market myself. People come looking for me. I'm doing good work. I can accept that. It's not about being, humble or not humble. It's the fact I have a good caseload. And so I don't have to have those outward things for success. Now, am I writing a book? Yes. Not for that reason.
Yeah.
Right. So that's that shift of perspective where it doesn't mean your life gets upended, and some people will say to me, will I not want to be married anymore after this? I'm like,
No, make it closer.
Yeah.
If
And
anything.
chances are that you're going to get more creative in how to be present with the person that you love and how to be able to talk about what you need with the person that you love from a place of feeling solidly anchored internally that you're going to be okay. And you'll be able to tolerate whatever their response is, right? You'll be able to tolerate it. That's a real position of strength, right? And that's when I talk to people, particularly women who have a very hard time often with boundaries because they're so busy caretaking and they've gotten sucked into caretaking role so much, it becomes their identity.
Yeah.
Is that psilocybin does a really, really good job of solidly anchoring you internally. So you are less other focused, right? Am I okay? Am I smart enough? Am I doing it right? All that. And this is true for everyone, but I like it particularly for women because of the caregiving thing. To be able to kind of get anchored internally where you still need and want people, but not to show you who you are, right? Like who you are. You have a sense of that. And I think that is circling back sort of that spiritual piece, that soul piece. It's feeling so completely anchored and sort of integrated into all aspects of yourself that you can tolerate somebody not liking you. You can tolerate making a mistake. You can tolerate, somebody being kind to you, which is often a case for many folks that come with childhood trauma. They can't tolerate anybody being tender and loving and kind to them. Right? So it's learning how to get that solid anchoring so that you can tolerate your life and know that you're not going to collapse, even if something goes south. Right? It's okay. You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the most important gift to me. This is not a magic wand. There's work. When you're finished that first month, we always say, this first month, I really just want you to carry a notebook with you everywhere and just write down everything, every bizarre idea and thought that comes up, because it may not make any sense to you now, but over time, all that stuff's going to coalesce into something and you're going to have more meaning. So give yourself a chance to have that without trying to fix everything and change
And don't
everything.
make any major
No
changes.
major changes.
No decisions for a month.
Yeah.
Give it a
Also
month.
true.
Yes.
Don't sell your house. Don't quit your job.
No, I work with people who have gotten themselves really into a real kind of mess because they came home thinking they knew something and they didn't have the whole story. I always say that doing medicine work is a little bit like an archaeological dig, right? So an archaeologist will dig in a particular place. They don't just dig anywhere. They dig in a particular place, right? And they encounter fragments of things. They know it's important, but they know it's not the whole story. So you don't get hung up on the fragment. Just take the fragment and move on.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah. And then sometimes what's going to happen is they're going to find a dark cave. And what are they going to do? They're going to shine a bright light into it and say, what is this here for? And that's what we want people to do.
Sometimes we don't know that the cave exists unless we've
excavated enough. Exactly. Dig
and
enough.
That's a great analogy.
Right?
I
And
like
so,
that one.
so we say to them, so that next month, all of those fragments are coming together and you're starting to kind of name it and understand, where does this fit? And sometimes it takes a long time to understand, but that's okay. Don't make any changes because you don't have the whole story yet.
Yes.
And give yourself time to do that. And even people come home and say to me, a few weeks later, I don't really feel like there's been a lot of change. I'll say, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It took
because it's
6 months for us
absolutely
on Ibogaine to like 6 months of integration after doing it, of going through an emotional roller coaster.
Yes.
Absolutely. And at some point, about 3 months in, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. So was this a bad idea?
And
right.
my example is the bookshelf. And I think we talked about that on our call a few weeks ago, is it feels like someone knocks over your bookshelf and all the books are on the floor, and it's up to you to determine what books go back on that shelf. Because that's another common misconception too, is you're also spotlighting some of the things that maybe you loved about yourself.
Yes.
And then you realize that I'm not attached to that. Maybe that isn't like part of my identity, right?
Right.
For example, like I used to think I had to be the loudest guy in the room, right? I have to be, make the jokes, to be the center of attention, right? Blah, 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 when I'm engaging. And that changed for me. But that 6 months after that, I felt that, I kind of lost that and I disengaged more. So I was like, I can't do that for work. And it just took time, 6 months
to find
really
that balance.
Find the balance.
Yes.
The pendulum swings, right? We got to find that equilibrium.
Right. Exactly. And that's why, that keeping a journal and keeping track of this data, this information, without evaluating it, without doing anything with it right now, just taking it in, just allowing it to get curious.
Non-judgmental curiosity.
Yeah, this is our
Walt
mantra.
Whitman.
Phase.
Yeah.
Yes.
Walt Whitman. Be curious, not judgmental.
Exactly.
I try to remind myself that every single day.
And this is the mantra at the retreat. We're always saying it over and over again to people.
I lead meditation every morning, and we read something so that people get focused. 3 times in that reading, I say non-judgmental curiosity.
And
be curious without judgment.
Exactly. And allow yourself to go places that are unexpected and maybe even a little distasteful to you in your waking hours. We should be challenged. And let yourself be challenged by it without any judgment and without trying to make anything out of it. Just take it in, be curious. There's a lot of symbolism that can happen in a journey. And so it isn't always face value. There isn't like, this is related to this event in my life, and this is related, maybe not.
Thumbtacks and red strings.
Yes, exactly.
We don't want you to get, for the first couple of days, don't worry about meaning.
We don't do any meaning making at all. And we discourage it because it's like you don't have all the information yet.
You're trying to apply what you want to apply to the experience.
Exactly.
And
it's like,
it's ego-driven inherently.
Right. And the medicine, you'll hear this again and again, that the medicine has a wisdom of its own. It seems to go where you need it to go. I always say, the body, the human body, has its own innate healing ability. It's always working for homeostasis, no matter what's going on. It's trying to make some change. If you get cold, you shiver, the muscles start to warm up. That's how the muscles warms the body, right? So it's always working for homeostasis. So we have that healing wisdom of the body, and then we have the healing wisdom of the medicine. And you put those two together, we want to get out of the way, right? Because that doesn't require us to do anything, but just be open to it. Allow the dig to continue, right? Just keep looking for the fragments. Don't be afraid of the cave. It's there for a reason. There's a meaning, there's a story there, and it may not be clear in the beginning, and that is okay. In fact, it's a little bit of the fun, if you ask me.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's like a highway as well, as you have all these cars passing. You got to clear some of that traffic out.
You do. Right.
And kind of the big characteristics that I'm seeing too in what we're talking about, to kind of bring it down to one word, is like reducing stress. When you take away those implicit thoughts and all this garbage that's going around you, and you're curious, you're not inducing yourself with stress.
Right. Exactly. And I think that when we are able to shift, like my list of must do's, should do's, must have, all those things, when you can shift off of that, man, the stress falls away, right? Because I don't have deadlines. I don't have things, these imaginary, landmarks and benchmarks I have to hit. I don't have to do that.
And just have faith in yourself.
Exactly.
You know how to do this. Everybody knows how to do it. You've gotten to this point because you were trained to be exactly yourself,
where you're supposed to be, right?
And it's the thoughts that get in our way that prevent that, and they strip away the intuition. And, and I mean, we have, as humans, we've lost this that instinct, right?
Right. Exactly.
We ignore that so often.
Yeah, we overcomplicate it.
Yeah, and what I love about kind of the military community is they hone that skill and they teach you that. And then we reintegrate back into society, and we're taught, like, you got to get back into that mode, right?
Yes.
So you're taking away all the rules, and then you're implementing those rules again,
back,
and you're confused.
Yes, exactly. Oh, I know. When I came out of the service, it was probably a good 5 years before I figured out that how to navigate. I think there's several organizations that work to help folks integrate back in. And one of the biggest things for me even was not combat. But obviously I wasn't in a combat setting, but I had a great deal of responsibility and I was respected, and I didn't have a college education at that point. When I came out, none of that counted for anything.
Yeah, you
and
lost your tribe as well.
Right. You've lost your tribe. Exactly. And it was like, so I don't matter now. I don't count for anything. None of that stuff that I did, all that important work that I didn't count for anything. And that was very confusing and demoralizing. And so I think that that's a big piece of this too, is helping. And I think there's a quality of, there's a kind of grief in that. And I want to touch on that before we're finished here, is the grief work that psilocybin helps. So my teacher told me that in her experience of doing this for many years, is that everyone in their first journey does grief work, whether they're doing it 5 minutes or 5 hours, they're doing grief work. And I have found that to be true. And there's so many places in which grief is intermingled. It's intermingled in our shame. It's intermingled in our fear. It's intermingled in our trauma, for sure. And the grief can be all kinds of things. It can be actual bereavement, but it's also not having the parent you really needed and deserved, not having the household, not having the opportunities and successes, and loss of relationships, and grief over actions that we've had to take. Sometimes there was no choice. There are many of us who walk around with shame for things that we've done that, under the circumstances, could we have done something different? We probably would have, right? But there we are, right?
The only animal to suffer for the same mistake more than once.
Yes, exactly. Right. We just keep, and it's that thing in the frontal lobe is giving us this great gift of recall.
Yeah,
we're like, thanks, but no thanks, right? Yeah.
That's two things though, is we need to, and that's what the medicine also does, is it teaches you how to be in the present moment. Because when you're in the past, you get depressed. When you're in the future, you get anxious.
Yes.
So finding that time for yourself to let that melt away for 5 days.
In your body. Yes, to be in your body.
And that's why we do emphasize meditation as part of this this whole journey.
To help that grounding.
And I always tell people, if you don't want to meditate, take 3 big breaths. Breathe out slowly. See how you feel after that.
Exactly. That's why we do some breath work. We do a number of different things, because it's like there's more than one way up the mountain. So when we say meditation, we don't necessarily mean you're going to sit for 20 minutes in a formal meditation. There's lots of different ways to meditate. And so we kind of play around with that so that we can help people find their way. Because it doesn't matter how you do it, only that you find some way of creating psychological and physical space for you to be with yourself, so you can know your own mind, so you can know your own heart,
and
you
be
can know
in the
yourself.
present moment.
Right.
And back to grief as well, as sometimes we don't even know
that it's grief.
We're shuffling up that it is grief.
Right.
You mentioned the childhood stuff, right? Something that we just feel in our souls that it's who we are. Yeah. Then you kind of go back and you realize, I'm detached from everybody because my mom wasn't there.
Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. Where I just learned it wasn't safe. Right. It just wasn't safe to reach reach out.
And,
So I
and
don't.
like back to yours as well is a trust in people.
Yes,
So that
exactly.
stems from something as
Right,
well.
exactly.
And without having that moment to sit down and realize and shine that light through that
Yes.
cave, you're not going to be like, oh, I
Yeah.
can't work on that.
It's just how I am.
Yeah,
That's what
it's
people
just how
say.
I
It's
am.
just how I am. It's like, maybe. That's my answer to most things.
Yeah.
I'm
And
like an attorney. They always
challenge
say it
yourself,
depends. I'm always
Yeah.
saying maybe.
Yeah.
I like what you said about the past and the the future and so forth. In cartoons, they always have like the dialogue bubble up here about, and that's exactly what ruminating and thinking is. It pulls us out of our body into the past. If only, kind of all that.
I
and
should
then
have.
Should
and
have.
right, should have, shouldn't have. And then what if? Well, those are places that are all outside of us. The only place
Yeah.
any of us ever has is now, this
Yeah.
moment right now. It's all there is. And so being able to learn how to practice that and you're right, the medicine helps people to get this real sense of, I am in my body and I am here. And now how do I navigate here? And it's such a relief because you're not, there's no agency. Nobody's figured out how to go back in the past and change anything. So there's not really much you can do there, right?
Can't do anything.
Can't do anything there. And the future, we're kind of making it up, right?
It's a future memory.
Exactly. Yeah. For future self, right? Yeah. Yeah. And so, we think about, I always say we've all had the experience of having a conversation with someone that we knew was going to be horrible. And then you had it and it didn't go that way at all.
Yeah.
It's like, that's how the future planning goes.
20%.
And that goes back
right.
to what you're saying as well, is you're going into that conversation with judgment.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important. That's why I repeat that. And I have it written on my mirror, is like, be curious, not judgmental.
Yes.
Because if you go into any situation like that, you have understanding
Right.
away. If I'm seeing a lady yelling at the barista at Starbucks, instead of saying this is a bad woman,
Right.
maybe she had the worst day of her life.
Exactly.
So it's that, you know,
And also, checking with yourself. Like, one of my favorite quotes, and I forget where it comes from, is, things are about as big a problem as we decide they are. And so when we see the woman yelling at the barista and we start getting ourselves upset, like, what is that about?
Yeah.
Like, what is it going on with us? Why is this an issue for me?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
do I need to do something for myself? Is there something that needs to happen here? Maybe there is something that needs to happen to help.
Yeah.
But if I'm just getting upset and then I go to work and I tell all my colleagues about this terrible thing I saw, and I'm all angst up, and they're all they're recounting
Like,
stories. Yeah, I saw
I was
a woman
in traffic
once.
today and it
Yes.
was so bad.
Right. And it's like, and it's like, why is that actually a problem? Like, think
Yeah.
about, my least favorite word is annoyed. People walking around, I'm so annoyed. It's so annoying. I'm like, really? Why? Just take a moment, because it's often just sort of tying it back to some memory or belief system about something, or anticipating like, oh, I need to avoid this because, and it's like, just taking the time, and psilocybin does have the ability to help people to gain a different perspective on just their own beliefs and their responses and all of that. And that's
It's
just
like a
gives you-
mirror as well.
Yes,
Like
it's beautiful.
It hands you a mirror.
Yes.
As well. So like in conversations now, I'm able to be, if someone says something to me and it hits me, I'll be like, oh, I got to unpack that later,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I gotta
I
think
have to
about that.
dissect that one
Exactly.
and find out what the root cause is.
Right.
That,
Right.
but oftentimes we just get defensive and we
Yes.
reciprocate that.
Exactly.
and then
Exactly.
it's
There's a
detrimental.
marvelous book out there by Michael Singer called The Untethered Soul. And he, I think he was like one of the people who created WebMD, for better or worse.
Okay.
So he's like a smart guy, and he's, very analytical. And he teaches this method of meditation and sort of mindfulness to help you to not get hooked into your thoughts, and how to really think about your thoughts and how to pay attention to your thoughts. And it's a beautiful way of allowing yourself to notice when something's got you. You got hooked by something.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? And what do you need to do? Is there some softening around your heart space you need to do to allow yourself to be present with that, so you can get information, right? As opposed to analyzing it and thinking, maybe checking internally to see, what is the story here? What is the hook? What is it that's happening here? It's kind of what you're saying. I need to unpack that later, right? It's kind of a little bit how to do that a little on the fly, right? Learning to just stop and, what is that?
Yeah.
Why am I getting all upset about this?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are great tools. And this is part of our integration process with people, is recommending things for them to other other kinds of providers, sometimes people can really benefit from doing some, I've had some people come out of it saying, I totally understand now how people could do energy work. Like, great. If that resonates with you, maybe you might go take a Reiki class. It's like a 4-hour thing. You can learn how to do Reiki on yourself, right? And your children or whatever. Some people, they want to do more of, they want to be more physically healthy, but they don't want to go to a doctor and take medicines. Great. Maybe you benefit from working with an acupuncturist or somebody. So it's like finding other modalities that can help continue to integrate a way of them being present in their body. And then we have lots of books and stuff and podcasts and recordings and, all those things that we ask people to check out, not with necessarily an agenda for them, but it's just another way. It's like the different ways you can hear something.
Open more doors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
The more likely you're going to make a connection. And during that time, you're continuing to have insights. And so, I always say, you're going to notice where the changes are by actual interactions in your life.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you just have a conversation, you're like, normally I get really upset when I talk to this person, and this time I didn't. Trust that that's a change. And now experiment with it. Can I have a difficult conversation with this person? Right.
Yeah.
Can I talk to this person?
Challenge yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're
play
also,
with it.
And you're also very surprised that how other people respond to you. You don't need to go home and convince anybody of anything.
That's right.
You can just be in the world in your newborn self, and they'll see it.
It attracts.
They'll understand, and it
attracts.
attracts people.
And that goes back to my story as well. When I thought I had to be the loud person in the room, the dynamic of the people I attracted changed when I wasn't like that.
Yes.
It wasn't the drinkers anymore, right? It was more conversations like this and more connection.
Yes.
So I felt, and it took that length of time to understand that and see, a year after that,
Right.
the change as well.
Right.
So that's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'd also suggest, though, that, that ability to be the center of attention, that's actually can be helpful sometimes, right? There's a time.
Sure.
So this is the other thing when people are worried about they're going to change themselves or they're going to have to let go of aspects of themselves. Like, maybe not.
No,
Maybe not necessarily. You're just going to have a different way. You're going to understand yourself in a different way and your connection and your place in the world in a different way, so that you'll bring that gift that you have to be social and to engage people, but you'll use it in a different way. And I think that that's an important thing too, because I do think that sometimes people are afraid they're like, their brain is going to change.
Yeah,
they're going to be
very much
really different and all those. And it's like, no, there's something that happens and we don't really quite understand all of it yet. But it's by and large, it's a very positive thing. It's not something to be afraid of. But you still have all your power of choice and free will, and you can still go back and do all your bad habits.
You're still you.
You are still you,
Yeah.
and you can slide right back into all of that stuff if you don't do any of the other work. And so that's a great, that's the control and the power that people have over their own experience.
I think those are the two most important pieces when somebody's considering going into a program like this, right?
Yes.
One, the apprehension of,
Yes.
will I be the same person? And two, hammering down and doubling down on the integration is so, so important.
Very important.
This is not a magic fix-it pill. It's
Exactly.
not going to do anything for you if you don't do anything for yourself.
Exactly. We just say that again and again. And sometimes people do not hear us.
Yeah.
They will not hear us.
Unfortunately.
Yes, I
for
work
them.
with someone with pretty significant OCD, and no matter how many times we said that, when he was done, he said, "Well, I saw a documentary once where a guy said he was cured." I said, "Yeah, but they didn't tell you the story.
Yeah.
You didn't see how many months of work he did. 2 weeks after the experience, I still have OCD." Well,
Yeah.
okay, well, that's not completely surprising.
Yeah, it's the physical
Right.
therapy analogy as well.
Yes.
Is you could go in to get all the work you need with the physical therapist, but if you're not going home and doing your homework
Exactly.
and you're doing the exercises and the stretches,
Right.
you're not going to get better. I saw it all the time. It's like people would come in, why am I not getting better?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the first thing you ask. Have you been doing your stretches at home?
How's your diet?
Well, no.
Yes, right, exactly. And I always say it's also not an antibiotic.
Yeah.
Right, you're not going to take it and get well. This
Yeah.
is not how this works.
It's a tool.
It's a tool, and it's one piece of a process. And if you're willing to do the work, and I always think, people spend so many years of their lives trying to figure this out, and when we say we just really want you to invest 4 months of focused attention on this, and for some people that's like, what? It's like
It's hard to do, and I understand that as
right,
well.
I do too. But it's like, but what is the alternative? What have you been doing? So how much time
Be
have
at
you
80%
already?
for the rest of your life,
Right.
70%,
Yeah.
60,
If
whatever
that,
it is.
yeah, exactly. And so what have you been
How many
doing?
times have you gone to therapy over the last 40
yes,
years?
Yeah,
yes,
right?
exactly.
What if you invested the 4 months 5 years ago? Where would you be
Where
now?
would you be now?
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And so just, and you know, we say this with great love. You know, people come to this when they're ready, and some people really are. You know, they're sort of curious, and there's a part of them that wants it, and there's parts of them that can't allow it, and we have no interest. We trust the medicine,
And the
right?
medicine is benevolent as well.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And so we don't try to convince anybody. We just continually give them information,
Mhm.
continually let them ask any questions that they want. You know, we encourage them to learn more about it. And when they feel like they're ready, we'll be here, right? Or someone else. We can also help people find other places. And so, I mean, it's a wonderful kind of work to do. And we don't feel like that we have to do anything for it. The medicine speaks for itself, and the success that people have, and the research, which I think is really important. I don't have any fears around working with folks because there's such a tremendous body of research that supports this. As long as you're doing it within a certain protocol, you're going to be okay. And the people who come to us are going to be okay.
And we do totally, Laura mentioned a science-based approach. We know exactly what the medicine is that we're using. We do chemical testing of the medicine before we use it. We know the sources where we get it. We know who grows it. So, and then in advance, we have our medical advisor who evaluates. We do our own evaluation. The whole process is one of science-based plant medicine.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic.
All right. So where can we find y'all at?
So,
Website, social media?
yeah. So we have a Facebook page, Sweetgrass Wellness, but we also have we don't have a website up yet. We have a landing page.
If they put in Sweetgrass Wellness Retreats,
it'll come up.
Sweetgrass Wellness Retreats, you can put it-
2024, and it'll definitely come up.
you can put it on your site, and it'll take them. It's a complete explanation of what we've just said and what the process is.
Right.
Well, we
and
love that.
Yeah, and then the website, we've been working with some fiduciaries to help with some fundraising for folks who need financial assistance with this. And so the website will have some more information about how people can participate in that and take advantage of it as well.
Take
So
advantage
that's
of
a
it
piece
and donate as
Right.
well.
Yes.
Perfect. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for coming on and sharing your story and the amazing work that you do. I'm looking forward to seeing you grow and develop and the lives that you're going to impact here in the future.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having
Thank you.
us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much,
Yeah, you
both
bet.
of you. This has been the Medevac podcast, ladies and gentlemen. If you're interested in learning more about Sweetgrass Wellness, punch that into Google. There's also going to be a link wherever you're listening to this. Go ahead and click that and get in touch with Laura and Wayne if you need to. If you guys have any more questions or want to get in touch with myself or Dave, head on over to our Instagram page at Medevac Podcast or medevacpodcast.com. Leave some love. We would do the same for you. See you next week.
See you next time.
Bye.